Good afternoon, you are watching AnewZ. I'm Bakhtiar Asanov, and let's see the top stories. US President Donald Trump ambushes South African president in the Oval Office with claims of white persecution. 2 Israeli embassy staff have been killed outside a Jewish museum in downtown Washington, D.C. Türkiye, Iraq and Syria to form a joint mechanism for PKK-YPG disarmament. Tensions flared during South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the White House. US President Donald Trump confronted him with footage of the anti-white incitement in South Africa. He also announced a halt to US aid. Ramaphosa acknowledged the challenges and pledged deeper cooperation. For more, let's hear from our Ubi Shibander in Washington, D.C.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa came to the White House on Wednesday to talk about improving ties and the bilateral relationship with the United States, which has been at times extremely tense. President Trump surprised the South African leader and in front of a packed room with the world's media in the Oval Office played a series of clips that showed the mass incitement against white Afrikaan citizens of South Africa that have been organized by extremists seeking their extermination. President Trump has cut all foreign assistance to South Africa, and he's offered refuge to white Afrikaans in the U.S. in order to escape persecution. President Trump displayed footage of rallies in South Africa in which thousands were chanting, quote, "Kill the Boer," a reference to white Afrikaans, as well as an interview with a prominent South African political official widely viewed as inciting attacks against the Afrikaan population in South Africa. On a different topic on the African continent, President Ramaphosa thanked President Trump for the ongoing efforts by Washington to broker a peace deal in the conflict between the Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Rwanda, a conflict that has killed and displaced thousands in a mineral-rich area. White farmers in South Africa have faced repeated attacks over the years, and many fear that their land will be forcibly appropriated. White House officials have said that they want to see the South African government do more to stop such attacks and to crack down on the incitement against white Afrikaans. After viewing the video that was showed to him by President Trump, President Ramaphosa said that the incitement in South Africa was being led by a small minority. President Trump pressed back, saying that more needs to be done to prevent mass killings. When pressed, Ramaphosa relented and said that South Africa faces significant criminality and that they need to work closer with the U.S. as a partner to confront such challenges. Trump reiterated that thousands of ethnic white Afrikaans are trying to immigrate to the U.S. because they feel that they will be killed in South Africa and have their land taken, and that nothing is being done by the South African government to stop such attacks and activity. Clearly, this is an issue that the U.S. president is passionate about, as well as one of his key advisors, Elon Musk, who comes from South Africa. And this is an issue in which the U.S. government is putting significant pressure on South Africa. Further talks behind closed doors are expected to take place between the two leaders, hoping to resolve this issue. Mube Shibander, Washington, D.C., AnewZ.
But to help us unpack the stakes and the symbolism of this encounter, we are joined by Abdul Nur Tumi, Middle East and Africa political analyst from Paris. Mr. Tumi, thank you for joining to AnewZ.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me.
Mr. Tumi, President Trump's reference to white genocide has been widely discredited, yet he used it to frame the meeting. What political purpose does this serve domestically and internationally?
Actually, this is a sort of provocative style of President Trump. And this is, unfortunately, it's another ambush set for a foreign president. And we saw that with the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelensky, and how that actually moment in the White House turned into a fiasco. Whereas the South African president, Mr. Ramaphosa, did manage very, very well, actually, this ambush. And this is because of the maturity, the political maturity, and the long experience of the South African as a tough negotiator back 30 years ago when he was negotiating with the apartheid regime leaders at that moment. So this is just a kind of, I would put it in this political show or entertainment, because President Donald Trump has become an entertainer-in-chief. And this is, I mean, to him, it's fun to actually make uncomfortable his guests in the White House. On the other hand, the message is all about to his voters, I mean, white supremacists who voted for President Donald Trump, and who are actually those voters are a solid reservoir for his base, for instance, that he will be using in the next midterm in a year and a half. So whereas South Africa, it is very interesting. South Africa now is a rising state and has shown and actually imposed itself on this new posture of world affairs, and not only in the African continent as a pivotal state, but also on the world stage by actually joining the BRICS. And this is what makes the Americans a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to the close ties with the close ties of South Africa with China and Russia, for instance. And knowing that the U.S. has also an old actually presence and hegemony in the African continent that goes back to the era of the Cold War.
How important are South Africa's rare earth minerals and strategic resources to the United States? And could that be influencing Washington's broader posture?
Actually, it does to some extent, because we saw now on these geopolitical fights, and it's very interesting. I mean, President Donald Trump, did excel how to bring geology and politics together and putting them in this actually business deal, and speaking about the natural resources and the minerals in this case. And this is why he feels, actually, personally, President Donald Trump, he feels that he is facing a serious actually competition with the China and Russia. This is why, even though we saw how, again, this is the contradiction, the doctrine of contradiction of President Donald Trump's foreign policy, not only in Africa, but we saw that in the Middle East and how he's dealing with Europe and so on. But what is important here, actually, he prefers to push on bilateral level than integral level. And we saw how he actually did send a U.S. envoy, or appointed the U.S. envoy for Africa, Mr. Masad Bolos, who played actually a major role. This brings us to another area in Central Africa during or in the ongoing crisis between the Democratic of Congo and Rwanda. And to some extent, the U.S. did play a major role as a mediator and succeed to some extent to break through on this terrible crisis. However, we saw how President Donald Trump is still actually again, having these contradictory policies, like by actually carrying aid to humanitarian organizations, and even to some, actually, they were kind of soft power for American foreign policy in Africa for decades, such as the USAID and also Peace Corps and other organizations who were well implemented, not only in the sub-Saharan Africa, but also in the African Sahel, for instance, in Niger, Mali, and even in Burkina Faso now. So this brings us to these new geopolitics imperatives that are actually moving too fast, and the role that, again, the U.S. understands well, the role of other superpowers like China and Russia. And this is And on the other hand, the South African, as a regional power, does understand that very well. I mean, their leaders do understand that very well, and this is why are trying to position themselves for this multilateral level cooperation. In other words, by diversifying their partnership with those superpowers.
Mr. Tumi, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to AnewZ.
Thank you.
A shooting outside a Jewish cultural event in Washington has left 2 Israeli diplomats dead, prompting swift international condemnation. The attack has sparked renewed commitments from both Israel and U.S. leaders to confront anti-Semitism and strengthen diplomatic security.
2 staff members from the Israeli embassy, Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lishinsky, a young couple soon to be engaged, were fatally shot by a lone gunman as they were leaving an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night. Authorities have confirmed that a suspect is now in custody. The shooting occurred in downtown D.C., just over a mile from the White House. Police quickly sealed off the area surrounding the museum as part of the investigation. Washington Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela Smith said the suspect, identified preliminarily as 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez, reportedly chanted "Free Palestine" while in custody.
We believe the shooting was committed by a single suspect who is now in custody. Prior to the shooting, the suspect was observed pacing back and forth outside of the museum. He approached a group of 4 people, produced a handgun, and opened fire, striking both of our decedents. After the shooting, the suspect then entered the museum and was detained by event security. Once in handcuffs, the suspect identified where he discarded the weapon, and that weapon has been recovered, and he implied that he committed the offense.
Israel's ambassador to the US, Yechiel Later, said that the male victim had recently purchased an engagement ring and planned to propose the following week. The diplomat also said that US President Donald Trump personally called him after the attack.
On the way in, Ms. Bondi was kind enough to hand me the phone. On the other line was the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who told me that his administration is going to do everything it can possibly do to fight and end anti-Semitism.
Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to boost security at Israeli embassies worldwide after calling the Washington shooting a horrifying anti-Semitic murder and thanked President Trump for pledging justice and standing against anti-Semitism.
Technical level peace talks involving Russia and Ukraine could happen as early as next week at the Vatican, according to Finnish President Alexander Stubb. In an interview with his country's national broadcaster, Stubb said the discussions would likely include representatives from the United States and European countries, calling it a positive step toward broader international involvement. He highlighted Europe's growing role in the peace process, saying, quote, "This is what we have hoped for from the beginning." Earlier this week, U.S. President Donald Trump spoke with European leaders, including Stubb, sharing details of his recent conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Canada is looking at potential investments in U.S. President Donald Trump's proposed $175 billion Golden Dome missile defense shield. Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed Canada's interest but did not specify potential financial contributions. Carney mentioned that he had discussed the concept of the Golden Dome a couple of times with the president. The project aims to counter potential missile threats from nations such as China and Russia. China says the Trump administration's plan to construct a so-called Golden Dome missile defense system is a threat to international security and accuses the United States of prompting an arms race. But what is the Golden Dome and what does this mean for U.S.-China relations? Here is more details.
China is sounding the alarm. After years of developing its ballistic and hypersonic missile technology, Beijing now sees America's latest defense project the Golden Dome as a direct threat.
This is yet another America First initiative that puts the US's absolute security above all else. It violates the principle of undiminished security for all and will hurt global strategic balance and stability. China is gravely concerned.
Now he's a great senator from Indiana.
But in Washington, Donald Trump is undeterred. He's been unveiling a $175 billion plan for a multi-layered missile defense system aimed at countering threats, even those launched from space.
I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing.
The Golden Dome would rely on space-based sensors to detect and, if needed, intercept incoming missiles. The concept draws comparison to Israel's Iron Dome, also a US-funded defense system that identifies and intercepts rocket attacks. But Trump's version is more ambitious. For the US president, it's not just about protection. It's about completing a decades-old vision. He's reviving Ronald Reagan's 1980s dream of a space-based shield and giving it a $175 billion budget and a 3-year deadline.
Ronald Reagan wanted it many years ago, but they didn't have the technology. But it's something we're going to have. We're going to have it at the highest level.
As Washington builds up its shield and Beijing raises its voice, the question remains, will defense lead to deterrence or provoke a new era of escalation?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war in Gaza will continue until Hamas is disarmed, its leadership expelled and Israeli military control is established over the enclave. He also emphasized the implementation of the Trump's plan as a prerequisite for ending hostilities.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out his conditions to end the war. In an hour-long press conference in Jerusalem, he said the war in Gaza will continue until Hamas is disarmed and the Palestinian enclave is under Israeli military control.
I am ready to end the war on clear terms that will ensure Israel's security. All the hostages return home, Hamas lays down its arms, steps down from power, its leadership is expelled from the Strip, meaning whoever remains of it, Gaza is completely disarmed and we implement the Trump plan, a plan that is so correct and so revolutionary.
He said that he would only agree to a temporary truce to release the remaining hostages.
We have a very organized plan. We eliminated tens of thousands of terrorists, murderers. Our forces are capturing more and more territories to clear them of terrorists and Hamas's terror infrastructure. And at the end of this process, all of Gaza will be under Israeli security control and Hamas will be completely defeated. But it won't take a year and a half, I promise you, it won't. We are determined to complete the defeat of Hamas, release all our hostages, and bring a different future to Gaza. Otherwise, we will get it again and again and again.
He also added that 20 of the 58 hostages held in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023 are known to be alive, and Israel would employ military and political pressure together to bring them back. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has criticized the United Kingdom for its condemnation of Israel's handling of the war, the suspension of trade talks, and said that any intention to recognize a Palestinian state would be deemed a prize to terrorism. As the conflict continues, humanitarian conditions in Gaza continue to deteriorate. Despite Israel allowing 100 aid trucks into the region on Wednesday, distribution challenges have left much of the population without essential supplies.
After weeks of mounting desperation in Gaza, a limited delivery of humanitarian aid has finally crossed the border. But for many Palestinians, the wait for critical supplies continues.
After an 11-week blockade, aid trucks carrying flour, baby food and medical supplies began arriving in Gaza this week. On Wednesday night, residents in Khan Yunis were seen unloading sacks of flour from one of the first trucks meant to supply local bakeries. Despite Israel only allowing 100 trucks to enter on Wednesday, United Nations officials say the aid hasn't yet reached the people who need it most. Markets remain bare, soup kitchens are shuttered, and bakeries are still waiting for promised supplies. The Israeli military says a total of 98 trucks entered on Monday and Tuesday, but the impact of the blockade continues to weigh heavily on Gazans, who are locked in an ever-deepening humanitarian crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his government is open to a temporary ceasefire, but only for the return of hostages. He vowed military operations will continue until Israel gains full control of Gaza. For now, aid workers say the limited deliveries are not enough and say that with every passing day the need grows. Aid groups say they're ready to distribute supplies, but that safe access remains a major obstacle. Until that changes, millions in Gaza remain in a desperate situation.
The informal summit of the Organization of Turkic States concluded with the adoption of the Budapest Declaration. This marks a symbolic and strategic moment not only for the Turkic world but also for Hungary, which hosted the summit as an observer state for the first time. The declaration emphasizes advancing green energy corridors, promoting regional security and addressing urgent geopolitical matters like Afghanistan. Joining us now is Rosa Bayramli, leading advisor of the AIR Center. Rosa Bayramli, thank you very much for talking to AnewZ.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rosa Bayramli, Hungary has hosted this informal summit as an observer. How significant is this step, and can Budapest credibly position itself as a bridge between the EU and the Turkic world?
Well, Hungary's role as the host of the informal OTS summit is symbolically and strategically significant. Also an observer, Hungary has demonstrated a deep commitment to engagement with Turkic world, positioning itself as a natural and credible bridge between the European Union and Turkic states. This positioning is rooted in more than diplomacy. It is backed by tangible cooperation in energy, trade, education, culture, especially with Azerbaijan and Türkiye. Hungary acts as a voice for Azerbaijan within the European Union, while Azerbaijan is Hungary's gateway to Turkic and Caspian regions. This mutually beneficial relationship enhances Hungary's geopolitical relevance, especially in a time when the EU is seeking to diversify its partnership and energy routes. Budapest activities and active participation in OTS reflects a strategic alignment that goes beyond cultural ties. It supports broader Eurasian connectivity, which is becoming increasingly vital in fragmented global order.
Rosa Bayramli, given Hungary's current tensions with Brussels, do you see this deepening engagement with the OTS as an anti-EU move, or could it actually support European connectivity with Central Asia?
While Hungary's engagement with the OTS may attract increased attention within the European Union institutions due to existing political differences, this relationship should not be interpreted as oppositional to European interests. On the contrary, it can serve as a strategic asset for the EU. By building strong ties with Azerbaijan and other Turkic states, Hungary is enhancing European access to Central Asia, both in terms of energy and infrastructure. Hungary's participation in the OTS offers flexible platform for deeper bilateral ties and regional engagement. This is especially important for the EU's connectivity agenda and energy diversification strategy. Given the limitations of transit routes through Ukraine and the EU's desire to reduce dependency on Russian energy, Hungary's eastward outreach can facilitate alternative supply routes and foster greater geopolitical balance. And that is the opposite of confrontation, I'd say.
Thank you very much for this discussion. We appreciate your time. Türkiye is spearheading a comprehensive disarmament initiative targeting the PKK terrorist group in close cooperation with both the central government of Iraq and the Kurdish regional government. Under the coordination of Türkiye's National Intelligence Organization, or MIT, the process is gaining momentum across Iraq and Syria. Türkiye's National Intelligence Organization is leading a new plan to establish a joint mechanism aimed at overseeing the disarmament of the PKK terrorist group. The project involves setting up a joint system with the Iraqi central government and the Kurdistan regional government. Officials say talks with all sides have made good progress. The Turkish armed forces are directly engaged in supporting the operation, which spans multiple regions, including Baghdad, Erbil and Süleymaniye. Authorities say the goal is to find and shut down PKK hideouts, clear camps, locate hidden weapons, and make sure the group stops all armed activities. At the same time, Turkey is working with the Syrian government on a similar plan which targets the YPG terrorist group. Turkey says it's closely watching to see how Syria is pressuring the YPG to give up weapons and start political talks. The entire disarmament operation is expected to conclude by early September. Once the MIT confirms the full surrender of weapons through a final report, the Turkish parliament is scheduled to respond with a major legislative initiative. On the 1st of October, when the new legislative session begins, Parliament is expected to create a National Unity Commission. This group will focus on national reconciliation. It will also help former PKK members who did not commit crimes return to society. Further democratic reforms and reconciliation steps will only begin after MIT confirms that disarmament is complete. Azerbaijan's road to rebuilding its liberated territories is facing a silent and deadly enemy, landmines. In Karabakh and eastern Zengezur regions, massive demining efforts are underway, but the danger remains. This report takes us to Agdam district, one of the most heavily mined regions in the country.
The scars of war remain buried in the soil. Since 2020, Azerbaijan has been carrying out one of the world's most extensive humanitarian demining missions. The goal? To clear these territories of explosives and pave the way for safe reconstruction and return.
According to official data, more than 37,154 hectares of land have been cleared of mines and unexploded ordnance in Agdam. In total, over 31,500 explosive devices have been located and neutralized. Priority areas for clearance, including the Barda-Agdam Railway, the Fizuli-Agdam Highway and other strategic infrastructure zones.
During this activity, our personnel have undergone high-level training, and as a result of the head of state's instructions, they have been equipped for the effective implementation of clearance activities. Our mission is not only technical, it's about protecting lives. Every mine we remove brings us one step closer to safely rebuilding homes, roads, and entire communities in Karabakh.
In one of the most contaminated regions of Karabakh, clearing operations rely on a multi-layered approach. Teams on the ground are supported by advanced mechanical tools, enhancing both speed and precision in identifying hidden threats.
In addition to AnewZ's mine search team, mechanical mine clearance equipment and specially trained mine detection dogs are involved in the cleaning activities. This is considered one of the areas most contaminated with mines and unexploded ordnance.
Mine clearance operations in Agdam district are currently underway in stages. Azerbaijan National Agency for Mine Action and Ministry of Emergency Situations teams are mapping dangerous areas and preparing for the next phase of demining. Access to this territory remains restricted and movement is only permitted with special authorization.
Mine contamination doesn't just halt construction, it kills. Since the 2020 war ended, 394 people have become mine victims. 70 have died and 324 have suffered injuries in Azerbaijan. More than 210 of the victims were civilians, including 14 children and 1 woman. Despite Azerbaijan's repeated calls for transparency, Armenia has failed to provide accurate minefield maps. Experts estimate 1.5 million mines were planted during the occupation, turning fertile land into a deadly trap.
In addition to the road, the land has been cleared for agricultural fields, fruit gardens, and other infrastructural areas, and has been brought to a dangerous situation. I would like to use this opportunity to call on our citizens and our people to impose unlawful entry into the dangerous parts of the lands liberated from occupation, because this is dangerous for their lives.
Just last week, AnewZ cleared nearly 1,292 hectares across 14 districts, including Shusha, Fuzuli, and Lashin, recovering 36 anti-personnel mines, 23 anti-tank mines, and 377 unexploded ordnance. With new hazards uncovered each week, mine clearance remains one of the most critical conditions for restoring infrastructure, ensuring safe returns, and advancing reconstruction in Azerbaijan's liberated territories.
An Azerbaijani delegation led by country's Deputy Foreign Minister and COP29 Chief Negotiator Yalchin Rafiev participated in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, during Climate Week in Panama City at the beginning of the week. During the high-level talks, Rafiev highlighted Azerbaijan's COP29 achievements, notably the Baku financial goal, which aims to mobilize $300 billion annually for developing countries by 2035, and the agreement on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement concerning carbon markets. The delegation held meetings with UNFCCC Executive Secretary Simon Steele, Deputy Executive Director Nora Hamlaji, and Brazil's COP30 leadership to discuss COP29 outcomes and preparations for COP30. A personal exhibition by renowned Azerbaijani photographer Agdes Bagirzadeh has opened in Tbilisi, reinforcing the growing cultural dialogue between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more.
Agdes Bagirzadeh's photography is widely recognized for its philosophical depth, and the latest series offers a real glimpse into her inner universe. From abstract patterns in nature to echoes of Sufi mysticism, My Other Side captures fleeting moments that often goes unnoticed. Urban shadows, architectural textures, and dreamlike reflections that speaks to a timeless world beyond the self. This project is a subjective illustration of the world as I see it, the artist explains. I find a great inspiration in the randomness of daily life, coexistence of natural and man-made elements that shape our existence. The exhibition does not only highlight artists' international career, which includes showing in Venice, Budapest, Paris, and Baku, but also reinforces the growing cultural dialogue between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Having previously exhibited in Tbilisi's Zurich Art Salon, Bagirzadeh returned to Georgia with renewed artistic vision. This event stands as an important step in a creative exchange between two neighboring countries, reinforcing how mutual respect and shared heritage can foster growing cultural dialogue between two countries. The exhibition opened on May 21st, welcoming art lovers, diplomats, and cultural figures all alike. My Other Side will be on display until May 30. It's Nini Nikolashvili in Tbilisi, reporting for AnewZ.
A unique cultural event steeped in tradition was held in the Turkish capital to mark International Tea Day on Wednesday. Hosted by the Saudi Arabian ambassador to Turkey and his wife, the event, named Tea Journey in Asia and the Pacific, offered a vibrant celebration of the drink's heritage across the region. At the heart of Ankara, the residence of the Saudi Arabian ambassador to Turkey was transformed into a cultural hub on Wednesday to mark International Tea Day. Teas and cuisines from across Asia and the Pacific were showcased at the event titled The Tea Journey in Asia and the Pacific. Ambassador Fahad bin Asad Abu Al Nasser and his wife Rana Abdullah Bahamdan, who also serves as chair of the Ankara Asia Pacific Group, hosted the event.
A vibrant celebration of culture, heritage, and friendship through a simple yet profound tradition of tea. Today, we meet on the 21st of May, which is the Tea International Day at the UN. So, of course, we all know that with tea, we hold a lot of stories, rituals, connections that tea represents across our diverse nations.
The event aimed to highlight tea as more than just a beverage, saying it's a symbol of culture, identity and unity.
Tea is one of the world's oldest and, after water of course, the most consumed drink. Its story began over 5,000 years ago, and yet from bustling markets to our quiet homes, tea continues to shape our daily lives with warmth and tradition. Every culture has its own way of enjoying the tea.
The event featured 21 national tea pavilions, each presenting its own traditional brewing methods, flavors and ceremonies. Attendees had the chance to immerse themselves in authentic tea rituals, from interactive workshops and brewing demonstrations to captivating cultural performances. The program delivered a multisensory experience rooted in heritage and hospitality.
Whether in a tulip-shaped glass.
That's all we have for this hour. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more updates.